name is Matt, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to just get things started here. So I don't want to go over time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I just got to find one. There we go. I want to start by saying, welcome to Logan. I'm glad you're here tonight. Max, thank you for, sharing with us tonight. Daniel on 1 year. And was it Will from Kansas City, Missouri? You guys made it easy on me tonight because there weren't too many chip takers. Because normally I can't remember all of them. All right. Let's see. Let me get this. All right. Well, as I said, my name is Matt and I'm an alcoholic. And I was separated from alcohol on October 8th of 2015. I was separated from alcohol by a power greater than myself. I wasn't aware of that at that time, and I was certainly ambivalent to that power. I say that I was separated because it wasn't a choice of mine, and I didn't know then, but I found out later that it's because I had lost the power of choice in drink. It's because as a real alcoholic, I was hopeless aside from spiritual help. So that word spiritual, just like the book tells us, if I use the word God tonight, I mean your conception of God. I'll take us back to the spiritual experience where it says that, if you have an honest, if you're an alcoholic who is willing to face their problem honestly, you can recover. Okay, if you're an alcoholic who can honestly face their problem, you can recover. So long as we don't turn our backs on all things spiritual, right? It says that I can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. So if you're having trouble with the conception of God thing, or call it a higher power, just remember that gravity is more powerful than you. Okay, so that's one thing that's more powerful than us. But just know that when I speak of God, I mean your conception of God. So I am absolutely a real alcoholic. I am not an alcoholic because I came from a bad family. I am not an alcoholic because I was uncomfortable in my own skin as a kid. I am not an alcoholic because I'm a square peg in a round hole. In fact, even the book tells me that I'm practically normal in every way, except for when I have alcohol in my system, I'm incredibly selfish and dishonest. And my reaction to alcohol, so I can't. I have a family full of sober people. I'm not the. I'm pretty much the only alcoholic. I should say, as you guys call them, we call them in the rooms normal people. So I can't point the finger at any of them. My drinking career didn't start until after I was out of high school. I had a very busy, full high school career. It was a part of every different group, and the reason that I say that I'm not an alcoholic because of I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin is because that's one confusing thing that when I came into the rooms, it seemed like that we were wearing that like it was our badge. But I had to actually have some normal people in my life tell me that, you don't get that. That's not just alcoholics. Most of us feel uncomfortable in our own skin, especially when you're a teenager. But, I'm an alcoholic because I cannot take any amount of alcohol into my system. I've lost the power of choice in drink. Something happens to me when I do drink. I learned it later to be called, the phenomenon of the craving, where I can't get enough. Even if I wanted to stop, there's going to be a time and a place where my mind's going to tell me it's going to be different this time, or no thought at all. I'll just drink. I don't share a great deal of war stories up here, but I will take you through my journey through the steps. I will tell you that, as I mentioned in the beginning, I am a real alcoholic. So I can be found on page 21 in the big book, where it, basically, I love it. I can be the finest fellow in the world, but put alcohol in me for a day, and I become dangerously and disgustingly antisocial. The Dr. Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde, right? In fact, it's there where it says that I'm completely normal in every way, except for when it comes to alcohol, I'm incredibly selfish and dishonest. And, the bottom line is that anybody in my life who got in the way of how I wanted to drink, I didn't want them around, because alcohol was more important to me than in any of my personal relationships, for sure. So I burnt a lot of those to the ground, and thankfully with the miracles that happened as I went through this process, the 12 steps, and now that I live in step 10, 11, and 12, I can say that some of those relationships were mended, and we'll definitely get into that. I don't have a long list of, like one of the things that I found when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous was I could find all the stories that you guys had about your drinking. I could find those as reasons that I wasn't an alcoholic. Because you guys went to more rehabs, you guys had more DUIs, you guys totaled your cars more than I did. And so my mind was always like, oh, yeah, you guys clearly have a problem. I don't. Thanks, thanks for the information. Like the book says, I got this from here, So that's why from the podium, I typically try to just focus on what's in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, particularly the first 164 pages, which is where our program is found. Which is where the clear-cut directions are found. I've heard it called, the steps are outlined in the book, and it's like, no, they're actually specifically called clear-cut directions. So it's more than an outline. That's the outline on the wall. The clear-cut directions are in the book. I definitely qualified as an alcoholic. Luckily for me, I worked at a place where the CEO of the company and probably half the company, they were sober. They were sober alcoholics who were, most of them, probably living in step 10, 11, and 12. And I can't even count how many times various people tried to 12-step me, giving me big books, and because everyone else knew that I had a problem. See, but as an over-the-phone salesperson, I could get away with it. In fact, it was necessary. If I was having a bad sale day, even at one place I worked, my boss would give me $5 and say, go handle it. Because he knew that I'd come back after putting some of my medicine in, maybe just getting a pint of early times, that I'd jump on the phone and make sales, Because yes, it did make me feel more comfortable, in my own skin. That is absolutely a fact. But I find out later when I read the doctor's opinion that what was really happening is that I wasn't drinking to escape anymore. I was trying to overcome a craving that was beyond my mental control. And I'll get to that later, because that was a pivotal moment in my recovery. So I knew I had I knew that there was probably a good chance that I had a problem with alcohol. Everybody in my life had left me, including my wife at the time for, the third time. And this time it was because I had gotten physically abusive with her. I'm dangerously and disgustingly antisocial. But even then, I was like, maybe we just, like it talks about in chapter 3, through every form of self-deception and experimentation, I'm going to try to prove myself an exception to the rule. I'm going to try to prove myself not alcoholic, It was a lot of it was her fault, and maybe I just needed not do the hard stuff anymore. And but I had reached a point where it talks about in the book, that jumping off point where I could not imagine continuing to drink, and I couldn't imagine a life without drinking either. So I was at that jumping off point. I didn't know where to go from there, except for these people that would walk around the office. Some of them, they're like, God is good, this God is good. It's like, shut up. I didn't really want to have anything to do with them, but what I did is I walked into the CEO's office, and who's sober. And I told him, I said, I think I have a problem with alcohol. And I mean, he knew. I used to go on Vegas trips with him in his private plane, and it was like, and I was, everybody else was sober but me. I mean, he knew. Believe me, he knew. And then that was the start of my journey. He linked me up with another young man at the company who was maybe just had a few weeks. He had been in and out a couple times, and he's like, okay, so you're gonna go with Josh to a meeting tonight. And I said, well, tonight's really not gonna work, because I had one more drink in me. Actually, for my first 60 days, I was sitting on an inaccurate sobriety date. I was saying that my sobriety date was October the 7th of 2015, not actually October 8th. I mean, that's how bad alcoholism can be, right? Is that one day that I was lying about, so that I could say, oh no, I got 7 days, and I really only had 6. Like that one day that I was lying about for 60 days, because I had to, after I went into his office, I had to go back out one more time, It wasn't a heavy one. It was just walk over to the liquor store, grab a couple of little airplane bottle, blue Smirnoff 100 proof. By the way, if anybody here has ever drank out of airplane bottles and you weren't on an airplane, you're probably an alcoholic. Okay, just or half pints or pints, because from what I understand, normal people buy full bottles and they collect dust on the shelf somewhere. So. But that was just another attempt of me trying to control and enjoy my drinking. So that following day, it was a Thursday night, and I remember it vividly, and I wasn't feeling very comfortable because now at this point it had been probably 16, 18 hours since I had a drink, and you know how it can start to get uncomfortable. The book Doctor's Opinion calls it restless, irritable, and discontented. Because I didn't have the sense of ease and comfort that would come from the shots that I would have taken by then, just to, or just knowing that there was like some shooters in my bag or something, just like, whew, okay, I got a bottle, I got a pint, it's near the tire iron in the truck. All right, I know it's there. So it was a young people's meeting, and I wasn't feeling very young. And it just felt very cliquey to me. But again, my head's telling me I'm not one of you, and I'm trying to separate myself from the whole thing. Plus, really, the reason that I went to that meeting was mainly because somebody told me that they sold literature at meetings, and I wanted to make sure I got my hands on the biggest, most colorful one I could, so that I could leave it on the counter at home, where she could see it when she was coming back to grab clothes. And I even put a bookmark in it reasonably, not too thick, not too deep, reasonably, so that it looked like, look what I'm doing. Look at what I'm doing for our relationship. Look what I'm doing for me. Look what I'm doing for us. It's going to be different this time. So that was one of the reasons I went to the meeting, because I wanted to make sure that I got the book and it was sitting there, because that's, that just screams, like, look what I'm doing for us. I'm a good guy. So that was the very first time in that meeting where, like we did this evening, they asked if there were any newcomers. And I stood up, and my buddy Josh was like, all right, you can, he's like, I know you liked, Coke and stuff too, so you can say you're an alcoholic and addict. And I'm like, okay, I got this, And it was like, it got to me, and I stand up, my name is Matt, I'm an alcoholic and an addict, I later found out, my sponsor told me that's kind of like saying I only eat carrots and I'm a vegan, so we just stuck with alcoholic after that. But, something changed in me when I stood up there and I said that out loud in front of a group of people for the first time, and that was another step in my journey. I didn't hear much the rest of the meeting. It was kind of like Charlie Brown, like wah wah, wah wah, wah wah, wah wah. Countless vain attempts to control and enjoy our drinking. And that's what I heard. That's what cut through. Countless vain attempts to control and enjoy our drinking. I'm like, whoa. It still gives me chills just thinking about it. I heard that. I felt that. Nobody had ever put that in words before. I couldn't put that into words. I couldn't explain that's what was going on in my head. And I had a similar experience when I actually went home that night and I opened up that book, because it was enough to that cutting through was enough to make me say, okay, well, what else is in here? Because it was in California, and they often, a lot of meetings read a portion of chapter 3. And that's why I ended up hearing that. Countless vain attempts to control and enjoy our drinking. So I started reading the doctor's opinion, and then that's when I came across the idea that it's an allergy. And I could wrap my brain around that because I'm allergic to milk, and I'm like, okay, but I have no problem staying away from milk, And then it goes on to tell me, well, yeah, that if it was just the allergy, then we'd all be fine because none of us would touch the alcohol. But that it's also it's centered in my mind, because if I never picked up that first drink, then the allergy wouldn't kick in, which wouldn't then kick in the phenomenon of the craving, right? And I'm starting to put this together, and I'm like, okay, this is making sense. I can have an allergy, I didn't know the whole thing about maybe luckily in the doctor's opinion, it didn't mention too much about spirituality, right? It just told me that I had a problem in my mind. And reading further on is when I came to these men were no longer drinking to escape. These men were no longer drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving that was beyond their mental control. And that blew my mind. Because again, they put into words exactly what was happening to me. And I had, and it wasn't until that moment, that's exactly, because you have people telling you you can stop and just do this, do that. And before I got to this point, there were the countless vain attempts to control and enjoy my drinking, to prove that I was not an alcoholic. Everything on that second page of chapter 3, I tried, switching, I'm only going to do hard liquor on the weekends, just beer during the week, just beer, or I would switch to wine. But I'm the kind of alcoholic that has 8 different wine memberships for various places in Sonoma County and Napa, and we're getting expensive bottles of wine in, and I still go out to the garage to drink out of a plastic bottle of vodka, or we go wine tasting and there's a plastic bottle of vodka in the truck, because it simply wasn't doing, it was not, because again, I was not drinking to escape. I was not drinking for fun. I was drinking, at that point, to overcome a craving that was beyond my mental control. So it was at that point where I knew I was probably in the right place. Then I found the Monday Night Men's Stag in Simi Valley, California, which became my home group. There a lot of men with a lot of time, with who were very patient with me, but they made it extremely clear as soon as I walked into the door. They said, "Matt, you've been a taker your whole life. Now it's time to start giving back." They didn't tell me that we're going to love you till you love yourself. Okay, they didn't tell me that. They said you're selfish and self-centered. Above everything else, you need to be rid of selfishness. It's imperative that you put the welfare of other people in front of your own. And that's not them. They were regurgitating exactly what's in chapter 7, working with others. And I'm so fortunate that I found that meeting, because that's where I found a man to sponsor me. A man, I wanted what he had, but but not, he didn't have women and cars and he was sharing an apartment with his son. His wife had passed just a year earlier. In fact, come to find out later, him sponsoring me was actually at a pivotal point in his life when he was still dealing with the death of his wife. And we were able to help. Because, again, it tells us in chapter 7, nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking than intensive work with another alcoholic. And I don't know about you, but I think the loss of a spouse is probably a good excuse to drink, right? So this man, luckily, he was what people call a big book thumper, And I'm extremely grateful for that, because I found the recovery, I found the relief that I was looking for in these pages. We started reading the big book together. He, took me through page 1, through the cover page, right, where it says Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And I was confused about that because I had heard in so many meetings that you can't say recovered, you know. Yet it appears in the book probably 70 times in various forms. But he explained to me that in going through from, up to page 60, that what I was looking to establish was through the stories that were in there, through the chapter to the agnostics, I'm supposed to come to the first two conclusions. I'm supposed to basically work my way through the first two steps, right? I'm supposed to admit that I'm powerless over alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable. And I'm supposed to come to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. Because on that page, after it said God could and would if he were sought, it says being convinced we are at step 3. In fact, the original manuscript said, if you're not convinced, go back and read it again. We went through the book in a way that probably most don't. We looked at the word problem, and each time that it occurred, singular, not problems, but problem. We looked at the word insanity every time it occurred, because what he was trying to help me understand was, what does the big book mean by being restored to sanity? So we would need to find out, what does the big book mean by being insane? What is alcoholic insanity? Because I had been in meetings other than the Monday night men's stag, because I was going to a lot of, because somebody said 90 meetings in 90 days, it wasn't anybody at the men's stag, but I'm glad, because I was able to, build an AA community, and at the same time working through the book. But what I found is that people in the rooms were, who had many years were, my name is so-and-so, and I'm still insane, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to be insane for the rest of my life, what am I doing? What are these people finding in here if they're still insane? But in dissecting the big book, we find that what they're talking about with insanity is the alcoholic insanity. It's the insanity which precedes the first drink, which is one of 3 things. And we find this out in Jim's story, right? If you remember Jim, where he is now working for a car dealership that he used to own, and that kind of irritates him, and he's going out to sell. He thought he might find some prospects out in the country, and he went to a local, a place where he would usually probably drink, but he decided to get a sandwich, and a glass of milk. And he figured, well, if I'm having the milk, maybe I could put whiskey in it. Now Jim, if we remember, he already had lost everything, including his family, and was just getting that stuff back, But it said that he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. And so he thought that it would be a good idea, and he could handle it. It'd be different this time if he just mixed whiskey with milk. That was insanity 1, right? It's going to be different this time. I know that it was going to be different many times, because it says that we can't put into our minds with sufficient force, the tragedies from a week or even a month ago, and I'll even say, it doesn't say this in the book, but a day ago, or even that morning, because I'll tell myself all day long I'm not going to drink, and then I'm still walking into, the liquor store to get my fix, watching myself doing it, out of body experience. So yeah, it's going to be different this time. And then we find out in Fred's story one of the other insanities. Fred's a successful businessman, and he's got it all figured out now. He's lost everything also, but he ran into some AA guys, and they're like, okay, here's what you have. You're an alcoholic. And he's like, oh, okay. I'm a smart guy, and I got willpower. Now I've got all this information. I got this covered. And, he had gone on business before. And it even said, and this is what actually kind of blows the whole trigger thing out of the water. So if you've ever heard that phrase, that's not one that I recognize, because as a real alcoholic, life is a trigger. Waking up is a trigger. It doesn't matter, good day, bad day, indifferent. The bottom line is I've lost the power of choice and drink. I'm going to drink again unless I find a solution, right? So Fred, it was the end of a perfect day, it says. There wasn't a cloud on the horizon, right? And the business went well, even. And he walked across the hotel and he thought, a cocktail would be nice with dinner. Mental blank spot, the book calls us. Insanity number 2, right? Mental blank spot. And then we find out in Bill's story too, where he's, where, we may want to call it the F-its, where we just like, well, I know this is going to end up in tragedy anyway, but I'm going to drink anyway, right? That's why we went through the book that way, because then it painted a clear picture, knowing that, okay, so that is what I need to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to, is sanity. It's not the insane people the people that were saying that they were still insane and that kind of thing. It was clear to me what the big book was talking about, and I could wrap my brain around that. Is that I could have that sanity which restored to me, which preceded the first drink. Like it talks about it later in the book, where now I recoil from it like it's a hot flame. I was at a wedding a couple years ago, and somebody handed me, I said, "You want something from the bar? Yeah, give me a club soda with lime, please." They put vodka in it. And I mean, I didn't even have to put it to my lips. I could smell it. I'm like, whoa, Miranda, take this. She's like, what? I'm like, there's vodka in there. She's like, no, there's not. I'm like, trust me. Hair standing up on the back of my neck, right? But I recoiled from it like it was a hot flame. Reacted sanely and normally. The book says this. It says because the problem had been removed. I wish somebody would have told me that when I first came into the meetings. I wish they would have taken me to page 84. I think it's page 84. It might be 86. Right after step 10, where it says that we've been placed in a position of neutrality. That's all I wanted. I wanted to be neutral to alcohol. I didn't want to see, not walk down the liquor aisle. I'm neutral to it. Just like I'm neutral to black licorice. I don't particularly enjoy it. I know I don't buy it. I don't have to avoid it. It doesn't scare me. I'm neutral to it. I just don't eat it. I just don't drink. And that did not happen on my own, right? Which then took me to step 3. I'm definitely the actor, right? I'm trying to arrange life to suit myself. In the beginning, even though I may have had some kind of conception of God before I got sober, I didn't want to have anything to do with that, because I look at the world, the wars, and my dad's dead, and you took him away, and all this I had this I was like a kid with a Santa Claus list to It's just ridiculous, That's the way that I want this for Christmas, and then give that to God, So I didn't want anything to do with this power. But all it told me in the beginning is first, I just have to admit that I'm not God, right? And that alone, it tells me, is the keystone, right, to this new and triumphant arch through which I'm going to pass to freedom. Powerful words. Right? I want freedom. I want freedom from alcohol. I want freedom from this bondage of self, this prison that I put myself in, And so I could wrap my brain around that, because I knew I was self-will run riot, And it says, by the way, that alcoholics are an extreme example of self-will run riot. It doesn't mean that all human beings don't try to run on self-will, because they do. But it can be. But what I've learned is that it's fatal for me, And just as because with my sponsor, when it asked us to write, we wrote. When it asked us to pray, we prayed, as we went through the book page by page, word by word. When it was time to do step 3, we got on our knees, and we said the third step prayer. I didn't have this huge white light experience. I mean, it felt kind of good. Weird mostly though, because I'm like, who's watching? It was here we are, 2 men, we're holding hands, on our knees, but because I was working with a man who took me through the steps as they are found in the book, the clear-cut directions, it said that this will have little effect. Step 3 will have little effect unless it's followed by action, right? And it probably has the word vigorous in there, and immediately, not wait a month, sit on this. No, wait, how are you? You're only 3 months sober? You have to wait for your 4th month before you can start writing your inventory. No, we went right into it. And he told me, he said, look, your inventory can take you, 3 hours, or it can take you 3 hours in a week, or it can take you 3 hours in a month, or it can take you 3 hours in a year. In other words, just do it. It's just going to take you 3 hours, So we started this list, as it was laid out in the book. And I did it just as the book had told us. I did the first column first, right? It was just all the people, places, things, that I had a problem with, right? That I thought had offended me or harmed me in some way, shape, or form. And then of course the next column where we're looking at the reason why, the reason why you're mean, and then like what it affected, and basically the way that he described this process to me, he talked about tomato worms. And if you don't know what a tomato worm is, tomato worms live on tomato plants. Shocking, right? They look like a leaf. You cannot spot a tomato worm by just looking at the tomato plant. You actually have to follow the poop of the tomato worm, the trail of poop, to find the tomato worm. And he said that that's what this process is, right? The poop is all of the all of these things that these manifestations of self, right? And like what happened, why we stepped on other people's toes and they retaliated, and then we're following this trail, this messy trail of resentments, and to find out what the defects of character are. That's the tomato worm, right? That whole process was to find out what the defects of character were, because he said this is going to be the only time you do this step. He said because the bottom line is that you need to stop thinking about yourself. You need to stop writing about yourself. You need to start thinking about other people. And this is going to help clear all that garbage that's standing in the way of a deeper, more meaningful relationship with the God of your understanding, and a deeper, more meaningful relationship with the people in your life. Okay, that's why we're doing this process. And it didn't take long before we were doing step 5 together, and I was I shared with him and admitted to God, myself, and another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. And and he didn't have to try to pull too much out of me, because I did want to share my whole story with him. And there wasn't as much stuff as I thought there was. Like we probably all have a lot of similar resentments. Just like shocking, we have the same defects of character. So that's And just as it's in the book, we went straight into 6 and 7, because it told me that after I did this process with him, that I was then to go home, take the book out, and spend an hour reflecting on it. Go back, look through the first, the first 5 proposals, make sure I hadn't omitted anything, right? Make sure I had been thorough on all of it. And then this is because my sponsor said, look, 6 and 7, we've talked about your defects of character. You've shared them. They've become clear. We've found the tomato worm at this point. But now this is between you and God, right? You need to be ready to have him remove your defects of character, and then you need to ask him to remove those. So by the next day when I saw my sponsor, we were on step 8, and it was time to get busy again. And I was making a list. And as I was making that list, I showed him my list, and next to it I had, email, phone call, and he's looking and he's laughing. He's like, okay, so what part of direct amends do you not understand? And I'm like, you mean I got to do face-to-face with all these people? He's like, well, that's direct amends, unless otherwise impossible, And he's like, but don't worry about that right now. Let's just make the list, because you're just becoming willing to make amends to all of them. That's it. We'll look at each one later and make sure that that before it becomes something something in step 9, that we're not going to injure anybody else. I'll share with you a couple of 9th step things that were just absolutely game changers for me. And the first one happened. It wasn't under sponsor direction, and it was way out of order. I wasn't even to step 1 yet, and and I wanted to do an amends to my wife at the time, and so I call her up and I'm like, I need to see you. Can we meet at Starbucks? And she's like, yeah, okay. So we meet in the drive, in the parking lot there. And I'm like, so you may or may not know, I'm part of a spiritual program, and as part of my 12 steps, I'm to clean up the wreckage of my past, and basically I'm sorry for choosing alcohol over our marriage. And I practically turned and walked away. She's in tears and she's like, I forgive you. I'm like, that's not what this is about. because I had heard somewhere in the meetings that it was about me. The ninth step's about me. It's not about me. The ninth step was never about me. It wasn't about me trying to feel better either. It's about doing the right thing. It's about finally doing the right thing. These other things that normal people may take for granted, but it was about doing the right thing. It's about setting right what was wrong. The best way that I can describe the ninth step is, as it was explained to me by my sponsor, is an amends is like if I have been throwing garbage over the fence into my neighbor's yard for years, right? For years, just throwing garbage over the fence. An amends is going over there, it's picking up the garbage, it's going to the neighbor and saying, this garbage that's in your yard, I threw it in your yard. You didn't deserve that. It was wrong of me to throw it in your yard. Other than cleaning this shit up, is there anything else I can do to make it right? And then after that, is there anything else I'm not aware of, another way in which I've offended or harmed you? That is what an amends process is, right? It's not the I'm sorry for this or I'm sorry for that. It's like, you didn't deserve this. It was wrong of me to do this to you. And, I want to make it right. What can I do to make it right? And am I leaving anything out? Because I can tell you that I got very, very sick. I started getting very, very sick, and I'm sure that it's what the book calls blocking myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit, right? Because the manifestations of self had come back up. I still had that big ninth step that I needed to do with my wife at the time. Instead of the drive-by one, I actually had to do a legitimate one, and I was getting sick about it. She was driving a white RAV4 at the time, and everywhere I saw white RAV4s. Like, they were everywhere. They were haunting me. And then every meeting I went to, people were explaining the ninth step process. And I had never asked her what can I do to make it right. I had never asked her, is there anything else I'm leaving out? So we finally had a chance to connect because we hadn't spoken in probably a year. And I wrote a letter to start just to set up the meeting, right? And she accepted, and we had a chance to meet. And you know what? The most painful thing is that when I asked her, what am I leaving out? She said, when you were drunk, she's like, it didn't, and you said mean things and you hurt me. She's like, it didn't bother me as much because I knew you were drunk, but it was in between your drinks when you were hurting me the most. And like, well, what can I do to make it right? She said, no matter where we're at in life, no matter where you are, who I'm with, who you're with, she's like, I just want us to remain friends. And to this day, she's probably that marriage did not make it, right? We were divorced by then anyway, and but we have a better relationship now than we ever did when we were married for the 15 years we were together, 10 years we were married. Better relationship than we ever did. And she truly is one of my best friends, And I was fully prepared that she may ask me, I want to go to counseling and let's try to work on this. I was scared of that. But I was fully prepared because again, the ninth step was not about me. It was about me making right what was wrong, me making amends, mending something, taking what was broken and trying to fix it, And I've got so many ninth step stories where it was just so powerful on both sides, but I know I'm running out of time, so I will talk about step 10, 11, and 12, which is where I live today. Not always perfectly. Step 10, 11, and 12, I've heard people call it before the maintenance steps. I don't know if it says that in the book. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, but I know what it says. It says, after we read the ninth step promises and we make it to step 10, it says, we have entered the realm of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. So I like to just call 10, 11, and 12 the growth steps, not the maintenance steps. I'm big on like going to the gym and stuff, and I'm not, I'm not just about maintaining. I would rather grow, right? These are the growth steps. And there was a lot of confusion on 10 in meetings too. It super confused me in the beginning because people were talking, they would be jerks, and then they would talk about, well, I guess I have to write a 10th step tonight. And it's just like my sponsor had to, as we walked through the book, he had to show me, he's like, no, that's an 11th step, number one. Number two, 10th step says immediately, like right now, like do it now. And it's, and it's the same formula that happens over and over and over again in the book. these are the spiritual tools that the program's given me, right? It tells me that, when any of these manifestations start cropping up, so when Matt feels angry or selfish or resentful or fearful, I got to remember that one. I always forget that one's on 10, that one's a 10 step, right? If I'm feeling fearful, I have to tell somebody about it, right? But what do I do first? I ask God to remove it, and then I tell somebody about it. If I've harmed somebody in the process, I make an amends, and then I turn my thoughts to somebody I can help. No matter what, it always ends with, I turn my thoughts to somebody I can help. Because it's not about me. Above everything else, as the book says, I must be rid of selfishness. Well, what about this one thing? No, above that. Well, what about serenity? No, above everything else, I must be rid of selfishness. That's what the book is telling me. Because in order for me to stay sober and continue a life of sobriety and continue to carry the message to other alcoholics and continue to seek a God of my understanding, I've got to make sure that I'm staying on top of doing my inventory. That's why I'll never have to do a 4th step again. Now I understand, if people go, if someone goes out and then you've got years or even weeks or months and all this stuff builds up, and it may be appropriate. But step 4 is in 10. Step 5 is a part of 10. Step 6 and 7 are a part of 10, and step 8 and 9 are a part of 10. It's all wrapped in there. So if I can learn to live in step 10, and it's not always easy, then I can continue to, I never understood what the old timers said when they said the path will narrow, and now I get it. It means that I'm not allowed to get away with as much stuff as I thought I used to be able to. It's being on the phone and then chewing out one of my vendors because the product didn't arrive in time, and just being a complete jerk at 5:30 in the morning, totally trying to destroy their day. And it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with UPS. And then I know, before I even hang up the phone, that I'm going to have to dial them back and be like, yeah, it's Matt. Yeah, you didn't deserve to be talked to like that. That was wrong of me. And most of the time it blows them away, but gosh, we both feel better, So I don't get it right all the time. My prayer and meditation, from what started in the beginning, where my sponsor said meditation is listening and prayer is when I'm talking. It's also moved more into Eastern meditation. I appreciate 20 minutes of guided meditation in the morning, followed by maybe 5 to 10 minutes of prayer, depending, I started getting very mechanical with my prayer. I just check the boxes, So today I actually just put on some spiritual music, and I just sit and try to be present with God, Like I tell the guys that I work with, there is no wrong way. The only wrong way is to not seek, right? My way is going to be different than your way, is going to be different than your way, and my way next, 2 weeks from now is going to be different. But the only wrong way to do it is for me to not seek, And again, as I mentioned in the beginning, I can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. So I beg you, if you're having trouble with the spiritual concept, if you're having trouble with some kind of God of your understanding or higher power, just don't turn your back on all things spiritual. Just be open and willing, as the book tells us. It says it's enough of a start, and then hopefully you may find the same thing that I found. I mean, I'm the son that my mom always deserved. My dad's not around to see it. He was never around to see me sober. But it's part of the way that I make amends to him, is by being the son that she deserves. I'm going to get married here in the middle of October to a wonderful woman. And, life is wonderful. I get to be here tonight to speak, I am so comfortable in my own skin today, so comfortable in my own skin, and I hope the same for you. There is no craving. It's the place of neutrality that I've been placed in. Just remember that the book tells us that the problem can be removed. So I stand before you as a recovered alcoholic. Now that is a daily reprieve, right? Contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition, because I am told that if I do not continue to maintain that I will block myself from the sunlight of the Spirit, and the insanity will return. I'm going to tell myself it's going to be different. I'm going to drink again. So I got to continue to work on this thing. I got to continue to seek God. I got to continue to work with other alcoholics, carry the message. I got to continue to take these principles and living in step 10, 11, 12 and at my job, my place of business, in my family, And I hope you find the same thing that I have here. Thank you guys for letting me share.